Kaimere is a distant planet. It is defined by waves of life brought from Earth and set free to evolve independently in this new context. The indigenous life of the planet, swarms of microbes called magic by the people who live there, are what harvest Earth organisms and make copies on Kaimere. As the asteroid which concluded the Mesozoic never struck Kaimere, dinosaurs remain the dominant terrestrial megafauna. 15 million years ago, the lush and verdant world of Kaimere was choked in an Armageddon of ash and flame. A great planetary lesion had been opened, prying sections of crust from Arvel through Nikar and out to Kyrul, with lava bleeding at each wound. The ruling tyrannosaurs and their hadrosaur prey, which had defined the landscape for over 50 million years, were the first to perish. Giant sauropods suffocated in the toxic fog. Ceratopsids perished in their wetland homes as the waterways clogged with dust. Forests burned, roasting millions of animals alive. The survivors of this apocalypse were those humble creatures who could hide out in burrows or other cavernous shelters and subsist on whatever small or hardy flora managed to endure these conditions. Unlike the impact which suddenly annihilated a majority of megafauna at the conclusion of the Cretaceous on Earth, this was less severe, yet lasted over a much longer period of time, with peaks and valleys of devastation over many centuries. In times of recovery, algal and magic blooms were common, as an abundance of limiting agents were cast into the waterways, which resulted in further extinctions. When the intense volcanic activity and its consequences finally came to an end, most animals over 100 pounds had gone extinct. From the ashes, nutrient-rich soils prompted an eruption of invigorated forests. As the new jungle took over the tropical continents, animals had an abundance of new habitat to grow into, and grow they did. Many animals increased in size by several orders of magnitude within the geological blink of an eye, and 500,000 years after the dynastic extinction, Nikari's forests were packed with large dinosaurs. Not hadrosaurs or sauropods, but Thescelosaurs. Although many lineages of Earth's Mesozoic got independently enormous from little ancestors, some quite late in their evolution, like ceratopsids and tyrannosaurs, others remained small throughout the entire age of dinosaurs. Thescelosaurs were one of these lineages. Their largest member, the nominative Thescelosaurus itself, was a 4 meter and 300 kilo animal and would stack up in size with larger deer species, though most were substantially smaller, with taxa like Orodromeus, Zephyrosaurus, and Oryctodromeus being around 2 meters long and weighing around 20 to 30 kilos. Both lineages of Earth Thescelosaur, the Thescelosaurines and Orodromines, have been proposed to have been burrowing adaptations. Like Culindodromeus, a more basal ornithischian, they may have had a coat of feathers. Being small, burrowing generalists, Thescelosaurs absolutely thrived in this new world. While they had some success in Kyrul, it seems Pachycephalosaurs were generally the clade which grew large, and Kyrulan Thescelosaurs did not experience the extreme adaptive radiation of those in Nikar. Nikari Thescelosaurs were already abundant in 2 clades, which diversified as soon as the niches became available to them: the Archetyposaurs and the Cuniclosaurs. The relationship between these 2 clades remains debated to this day, The traditional belief is that they both formed a close clade, often designated as an order, with two clades in Nikari, and the Dromaeodracids of Hyrule being a distinct Thescelosaur lineage. Genetic studies counter this, suggesting that Dromaeodracids and Archetyposaurs are closer to each other, and Cuniclosaurs are quite distant. In light of this, and the more noticeable burrowing adaptation of the Cuniclosaurs, it has been suggested that Dromaeodracids and Archetyposaurs are descended from Thescelosaurians, and Cuniclosaurs descended from Orodromians. This would give them a common ancestor far back in the early Cretaceous or even late Jurassic, hardly grounds for inclusion within the same order. This is further complicated by elasmarians like the Drokel, which, despite relatively close resemblance to known-world Dromaeodracids, and traditionally grouped together, are even more distantly related. Elasmarians throughout the known world are of Arvelith origin, and as true ornithopods, form a surprisingly distant clade, and will not be covered in great detail in this episode. Cuniclosaurs are a highly abundant clade. 7 genera with as many as 49 species are found throughout the known world, and others are reported beyond. Most are around a meter long and weigh between 5 to 10 kilograms, although the sloth drake Grukan will sometimes exceed 3 meters and weigh over 100 kilos. Though a wide variety of coloration is found, they generally lead similar lives. Cuniclosaurs are fossorial, digging complex burrows. They live in loose colonies of related females and their mates. Most species are monogamous and mate for life, although some have a few males in the colony, and form more of a harem troop. In monogamous species, the only difference between the sexes is a slightly larger average size in males. In troop species, males are proportionally larger, often quite a lot more colorful, and have more aggression toward each other. Males of all species are highly aggressive with intruders. This has given them a reputation for great ferocity. A violent response to potential predators is territorial and only present at the burrow. When foraging, they quickly flee danger. Cuniclosaur hatchlings are born precocial and able to walk and feed themselves, yet they remain with their parents for protection until adulthood at the age of around 2 years. Cuniclosaurs are highly versatile eaters. They prefer low-growing vegetation like ferns, flowers, and cycads with a supplement of roots and tubers, but will eat just about any plant matter offered to them, and will readily snack on eggs, carrion, and small game that they come across. Though their overcoat is tough and waterproof thanks to grooming with oils produced in glands at the base of their tail, the undercoat down is much softer and prized for bedding and pillows. In the southern species, such as the Zaidi of the Free States and Picardiant Becolt, this insulating down is quite substantial. It interlocks and is particularly dense and soft. A domesticated lineage of Zaidi called the Durfel only grows an undercoat, and the annual shedding of this down is a lucrative season. The Archetyposaurs are, as their name suggests, often seen as the archetypical and quintessential dinosaur. This overlooks the adaptive radiation this clade has undertaken since the dynastic extinction. Some of them simply got big. This was the case for the plate-tailed Archetyposaurids, nominative family of the clade. Their most abundant genus is the common drake Hysteronyx. The phylogeny of this genus is complicated by feral domesticates integrating with wild populations, leading to most assembly treatises usually calling them all the same species, even though there's tremendous regional variation, and the prairie morph is quite gracile and having golden scales and feathers, the Picardian population being robust and having green integument. Some researchers argue that despite all the feral domesticates, which stem from the Kodrith common drake back during the reign of the first children 10,000 years ago, should be still designated as distinct species. There's also interchange in wild populations, and this is a highly adaptable and mobile taxon. The common drake of the crescent species, for example, have been found to have traces of prairie, Picardian jadrock, Codgereth, Free State's roquille, and Arvelith forest drakes. There are more details of this animal's history in their own episode, linked above. Common drakes live in small troops of related females and a few males. Though they can be quite violent in fighting off predators, and indeed they have many predators, they still prefer to flee. Sharp, keratinized plates along their tail mainly serve a defensive function, but the bright coloration not only attracts theropods to strike that area, it is also highly attractive to other common drakes. Both sexes have them, though their plates are taller in males. This defense is supplemented by barbed, detachable quills along their back, especially, again more noticeable in males, with the size of the quills corresponding to age and testosterone levels. Domesticated common drakes quickly lose these quills, though the fact that the trait resumed in feral specimens only after a few generations shows that there is retained in some capacity. Unlike cuniclosaur hatchlings, which are born with a full set of teeth and are able to feed themselves, archetyposaur hatchlings are helpless and reliant upon crop milk for the first month or so. They develop quickly, and by a month or so, they can feed themselves. This initial period of intensive care and nutrient supply not only helps them grow fast in this first month, it seems responsible for the close social structure that helps reduce infant mortality. A sister genus of histrionics is found in the forests of Arvel and Nikar and has taken the increased size approach to an extreme. The kotar is of staggering proportions, with the largest males reaching 12 meters in length and 10 tons of mass. Despite this great bulk, kotar are still bipedal thanks to massive tail muscles keeping their balance at the hips. Kotar live in small herds of related cows defended by a single bull. Like the common drake, they have highly versatile diets, though given their size they tend to be stricter herbivores and bulk feed on whatever vegetation is available. Both sexes are aggressive, probably because they're too slow to flee Zentaur and other predators in their habitats. Their claws and arm spurs are mostly used against other kotar, but are well documented in fights against Zentaur and competing herbivores such as the hukelgor. Hukelgor and kotar directly compete with each other as bulk feeders in terrain not overtaken by titanosaurs, such as highland forests. Generally, these sloths are more abundant in Arvel, while kotar are more common in Nikar, where the respective species evolved, though the low sea levels 1.5 million years ago facilitated interchange that they do still clash from time to time. While they do interact, there's some partitioning, with hukelgor preferring more grass and kotar favoring higher foliage, but they still interact so much that they rarely cohabitate. Though their feathers and quills are too small to be seen at a distance, much less offer defensive advantage, the plates are quite large and sharp. It deters attacks to the tail as kotar flee predators, though again, they are slow compared to Zentaur, so must usually fight if they don't get a substantial head start. If it comes to a fight, both sexes are formidable, though bulls are particularly proficient in a fight, and widely considered to be the most dangerous prey for Zentaur, aside from, of course, adult titanosaurs. Of course, not all archetyposaurs are large bruisers. Archetyposaurus itself is, at around 2 meters, analogous in size to their ancestors. The clade is also called builder drakes, and while all will clear nest areas and construct a pen of sorts, species of Archetyposaurus take this habit to an extreme. Using debris, they will sometimes even weave together fences or lodges in places that they lay their nests. Their constructions have often been mistaken for chimeran or hinterland giant settlements. The designs are built on instinct, not innovation, but their complexity has certainly not gone unnoticed. Like the common drake, Archetyposaurs have sharp plates on their tail and quills on their torso, though both are comparatively small. Their main defense is running, and while they are able to do this much faster than their larger cousins. This lineage also has a small domesticated species, the cat drake Chianash. Though there are many species in the tribe of little Thescelosaurs, the Chianash domesticated by Mountain Telmead is by far the most popular pet dinosaur throughout the known world. A nest-guarding instinct has manifested in them being persistent and aggressive mousers. They still eat grain, so aren't as popular as cats for vermin disposal and stock protection, but their intelligence, playfulness, and inclination to bond with whatever animals they live with makes them popular house pets. They lack the aggression of wild drakes, further improving their popularity. Like the Durafell, they can be bred only to grow an overcoat, though the fact that they don't annually shed means that they don't have much industrial use. They are soft, which does aid in their appeal as companions, and an instinct to excrete outside of their living space does make them easy to house train. A wide range of vocalization may not extend to speech, but they can mimic tunes and tone, making them a staple of entertainers. Though the tabby reminiscent colors are their most common morph, like most domesticates, they come in piebald, brown, gold, red, black, and white morphs. Another clade of Archetyposaurs are the Ophitetans, or serpent drakes. Early in their history, they were mistakenly assumed to be prosauropods, descended from animals like Plateosaurus. Through much of the 20th century, this theory dominated the assembly. It wasn't just external appearance, much of their skeletal anatomy converged upon that of basal sauropodomorphs, though numerous naturalists pointed to the hip configuration being quintessential ornithischian, supporting their evidence against this. The latter half of the 20th century saw a shift toward the Thescelosaur identity, supported by genetic studies in the past decade, nesting them as a sister clade to the common drakes. The most speciose Thescelosaur genus is Ophithetan. These snake-necked omnivores are scattered throughout the waterways of the known world. There are even a few marine species. They tend to be more selective feeders than other Thescelosaurs, and while omnivorous, their smaller mouths require a focus on higher nutrient food, like crustaceans, fruit, and leaf buds. Most Ophithetan are around a meter long, though the keat of the Kenterim Islands regularly exceeds 7 meters, perhaps due to a relative scarcity of large herbivores on the upland regions, where only the Biomnan exceeds their mass. The Picardiant Tamankoku is heavier, though shorter due to a more compact build. There are legends in the oceans north of the known world that the giant sea serpent drakes are found, though these have not yet been substantiated by the assembly. Hylophatitan, or the casque-tar, is a terrestrial serpent drake. Though far lighter than a kotar of the same length, their 10 to 12 meter bulls are still quite impressive. It was they who were most often compared to Plateosaurus. Casque-tar live in larger herds than most Thescelosaurs, and males are much more tolerant of each other outside the mating season. Though they prefer to be high browsers, feeding above the competition, they are also quite happy to forage anything within range of their long necks. The third and most derived family of Archetyposaurs are the spirit drakes. Though still mostly herbivorous, they are the most predatory of Thescelosaurs, with fish and small game making up as much as 50% of their diet. Adults have a high degree of binocular vision thanks to a wide skull and narrow snout. While they are proficient swimmers, thick skin does make them quite negatively buoyant, which is helpful when grazing on wetland vegetation. The jiao of the Suritic wetlands is believed to be more or less representative of the basal appearance of this lineage. They have a long mane of feathers, longer and darker in males, which appear to be a primarily display structure, though it does protect males as they fight one another and both sexes from Megaraptoran attack. Jiao females tend to reach around 5 meters in length, while males tend to add another meter and weigh up to a ton. Their largest and most famous member is the Jugashen. They are the largest Thescelosaur after the Kotar, with males often reaching 9 tons and a length of 12 meters. They are quite robust, with their adults having the highest degree of binocular vision of any Thescelosaur. They aren't predators of large game, but they readily wade into shallows and grab fish up to several meters in length. Their beaks are strong and very sharp, able to dismember fish with impressive speed. Their jaw strength comes at the cost of flexibility, but they still have enough cranial kinesis to swallow prey up to several hundred pounds. Unfortunately, to an animal this large, small game includes people. Zentaur and Kurojaku might raid a village to seek out livestock, yet Jugashen are much more interested in the villagers themselves. Jugashen are quiet stalkers, and it is not unheard of for one of them to sneak into a settlement, kill and collect a few people, then depart undetected. Only when chimerans are missing and webbed footprints are discovered in the morning is the attack known. There are many reasons for the walls and elevated huts of the Suritic peoples, but the Jugashen is certainly a frequent reason. Jugashen take up to 5 years to reach adulthood, the longest childhood of any Thescelosaur. They also have the largest egg of any dinosaur in Kaimere. Like common drakes, they have crop milk. Jugashen are generally solitary, though young will often live with their mother until at least the next year when the next clutch hatches, then with siblings until adolescence. In their first year, they are fairly vulnerable and have many predators, though as adults, Jugashen wise enough to avoid the heavily forested regions with more Zentaur, or deeper channels home to bull Kurojaku and giant crocodiles, generally have little fear from predation. When near water or their dens, they can be extremely aggressive. They have a dense coat of feathers until their first year, at which point their feathers lack thermoregulatory benefits, and they only have a thin coat on their backs and a mane, which can grow over 2 meters in the oldest bulls. While Jugashen are most famous in the Suritic wetlands, the species is found in less abundance throughout the wetlands of both Nekar and northern Arvel. The Kodoran Koku is a Picardian Thescelosaur in the same genus, though often considered a unique species. They have a much more robust build and a longer period with insulating feathers, with some females having feathers year-round in the highlands. Adult males are generally large enough to be unfeathered aside from their mane. Kodoran Koku are not as aggressive or predatory as Jugashen, and indeed are mostly herbivorous. In the highlands of Picardia, they remain generally solitary, though they are so common they tend to tolerate each other's presence. At up to 8 tons, male Kodoran Koku have no natural predators, and show a far more relaxed disposition compared to their violent cousins to the north, though the dangers of the young means females often attack anything that approaches her or her nest. The most derived and abundant species in this clade is the Tagduru. While other spirit drakes can swim but usually sink and walk along the substrate to forage, the Tagduru is a very proficient swimmer. With short legs to reduce drag as they kick, to power an incredibly widely muscled tail, they can attain short bursts of great speed that can help them evade most predators in the inland sea. Being better swimmers than marine sloths and desmostillions, Tagduru tend to graze in slightly deeper waters that enable them to avoid competition with the more dominant seagrass grazers. Their great size and herds, coupled with weaponry rivaling that of the marine sloths, Tagduru are able to hold their own in conflicts for shore space. As they must nest on land, they have surprising proficiency with climbing, to perhaps avoid nesting in an area near crowds of seals, desmostillions, walrus, and sloth. Males are larger and less nimble, but they can still climb up several meters of rock to make a nest that females will hopefully choose and lay with. Runen drake are a clade of elasmarians which first evolved on the grasslands of Arvel, then spread all the way up to Hyrule. The sailback runen drake of the Hausi Prairie was long assumed to be part of this clade, though as more of Hyrule's fauna was discovered, this species is actually now known to be a Thescelosaur of Hyrulean origin, not Nikari. While Pachycephalosaurs generally filled out the niches left vacant by the extinction of Hyrulean hadrosaurs, there are still some Thescelosaurs that thrived in similar niches. The sailback is the clade's only known world representative, though there have been related species found in Hyrule's forests and prairies. Sailback runen drake dig simple burrows, though they wander far while foraging, and their dens are often only temporary and used for a few weeks. This mobility, compared to the conventional dens of most Thescelosaurs being more permanent, is theorized as to why this particular species made the passage across the land bridges, which periodically formed during the sea level fluctuations up north. They are hardly the fastest dinosaur on the prairie, being slower than other runen drake and young Uctan, though they are quite agile and are hard to catch, and even their simple dens are often deep enough that they can reliably hide from predators. Most Chimeran Thescelosaurs are still quite small. After all, this proved a highly successful strategy throughout the Mesozoic. However, when an opportunity presented itself to get large, they took the unprecedented situation, and 3 lineages independently experimented with gigantism in a way that they never got a chance to do on Earth, at least as far as we know. There have been many types of herbivorous dinosaurs, but by far the most diverse and successful in Kaimere are the Thescelosaurs. Cheers to Gage for sponsoring this episode. Longtime viewers will have heard me call the group Parksosaurs in the past. In fact, one of my first episodes on this channel was an overview of Parksosaurs in Kaimere. This immediately reflects a real study that suggests Parksosaurs, the namesake of the original clade, was found to be a basal ornithopod alongside elasmarians, rather than a Thescelosaur. Thescelosaurs branched from the Ornithischian tree before sauropods, the clade which includes horned, duck-billed, and dome-head dinosaurs. In terms of primates, if ornithopods are monkeys and apes, Parksosaurs are thought to be a very basal monkey, while Thescelosaurs are lemurs. I would not be surprised if future studies with more material amend the cladistics of these animals further, and I will make adjustments to reflect that as needed. The reality is, there's a lot going against small basal ornithischians in terms of our understanding. The origins of a lot of derived clades look quite a lot like them. Look to any very early member of the Ornithischian clades, and indeed any dinosaur group, and they all have the same basic body plan, at least in broad strokes. Long legs, short arms, small compact body, long tail, short head, etc. Culindrodromeus, a Middle Jurassic sixth-tier taxon to the ancestor of sauropods, looked very much like a Thescelosaur 100 million years later. The basic body plan proved timeless, and it was successful all the way throughout the Mesozoic. For all their abundant success, and the fact that so many Mesozoic icons began with this body plan, there hasn't been a tremendous amount of study on them. Being smaller means there's a fossil preservation bias against them, and being small and frankly quite generic means that they're often overlooked. Many remain undescribed in museum vaults, and since they're often passed by museum goers in favor of more spectacular cousins, the unfortunate reality is they don't generate a lot of research funding or public interest. This situation has improved in recent decades, and has painted a more comprehensive and surprisingly diverse picture of phylogeny of these basal ornithischians, yet they still usually are relegated to the background of public interest, scientific study, and dinosaur media. Hopefully, future studies will reveal more about these animals. They may look a bit generic, but that is part of what I find so fascinating about them. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, and the enduring success of Thescelosaurs is a testament to the evolutionary merits of a more humble life in the shadow of giants. Also, if all of our favorite giant dinosaurs started out with this body plan, the potential directions they could have gone, with enough time and opportunity, are substantial. Next time you're in a museum with a sizable collection, be sure to check out any small ornithischians they have on display. You might find them more interesting than they first appear. Thanks again to Gage for sponsoring this episode, to my Patreon patrons for your support, and thank you for watching. See you next week as we dive into the reefs of Kaimere and the sea serpent who rules those waters. Cheers, folks!